everyone. Welcome to episode 297. It's a Monday recording, something that happens, once in a blue moon. But sitting across the table from me today, in case you missed church this week, you know that these always go off the messages. Well, Ken was out of town, and it wasn't Jeff's turn. It was Bernie's turn. So if you have not listened to the podcast in the last, probably 25 episodes, you won't know who Bernie is. And Bernie is now, though, right? You guys are confirmed members now.
Oh, absolutely.
You are WholeLifers.
We are WholeLife. We are part of the club, man.
We are part of the club. And so Bernie and I met years ago at Forest Lake Church when he was a pastor there, when he came on board. And we've done a lot of work together. And Bernie brought the message this past week, threatened by love. And so if you feel threatened, it's okay. It's okay. We are walking together. And before we get started, we're going to jump right in because we have way more to talk about than we'll get to. But there was a question. Now, Matt, I am sorry. Ken isn't here this week, so I'm not going to make Bernie answer your question because it wasn't his message, and he wasn't there that week either. We do have the question, and we are going to answer it next week when Ken is back. And just so you know, if for some reason we miss your question, just please send it to podcast@wholelife.church or 407-965-1607. Those both come directly to me. And then as a further backup, I am now an administrator on the website chat roll account, so I will be checking to make sure that we haven't missed any questions here on out. So Matt, doubly sorry, because not only was it this question, we also missed his question about 2 weeks ago. So, it's not like I promise we're not picking on you, and if you feel threatened by me, I'm sorry. We will work through this, and we will get it right. I promise.
Make him buy you lunch, Matt. Make him buy you lunch.
Thanks. So early on, Bernie got serious in a hurry, and he was talking about people wanting to throw pastors off a cliff. And he actually asked a question: what does a pastor have to do to get thrown off a cliff in Florida? I mean, just being that there's, really, I doubt there is one. If you know of one,
Dora somewhere, maybe, I don't know.
Sugarloaf Mountain. Send me the coordinates if you know where one is, and we'll include it next week. But I don't know about anybody else, but I immediately thought about, you've all been to the church where it's you turn and look at the clock when it's 1:30 and the pastor says, "You guys don't mind if we go a little bit longer today, right?" That's about for me when we're ready to throw them off the cliff because I got kids and they're hungry.
Right.
And you're just making my life miserable now, sir.
And all the people that volunteer to work with those kids are thinking the exact same thing. I literally, at a church I used to pastor, at a certain time, they would start to march the children in. The volunteers in the children's ministry, the Sabbath school, would just walk the children into the back of the church.
Like, it is time.
And they're like, "Look, dude, your time's up. It's time to be done." So
it's time to be done.
That was my cue.
I know, right? Well, the message this week is always, and of course it is February, so it is Black History Month. And so it was maybe the perfect message to kick the month off with, because I'm one of those where it's like, look, the Band-Aid might hurt a little bit. It's, your arm is hairy. It's in the worst possible place. The cut underneath is fresh. It's going to start bleeding again. Just rip it off and get it done. And let's talk about what we need to talk about. And the story of Jesus going back to his hometown, being the hometown boy that everyone, that's Joseph's boy. When you said that, I'm just like, you can totally just see people like, Joseph, he's back.
It literally says it in the text, too. It's like, isn't that Joseph's son?
But you can totally just see, everyone's happy. You can almost feel the positive vibes and the mood that's happening. Right. And, what about them people talking about nothing good come out of Nazareth? That's Joseph's boy, That's right. And you can totally feel that. And then, and immediately in 0 to 60, they're ready to throw him off.
They're ready to chunk him off the side of the cliff.
Off a cliff, because you can't be who you say you are.
Right.
And you can't do
what you say you
can do. And you had a quote on screen, and it said, "In the ongoing struggle to combat racism and to pursue diversity, equity, and inclusion, we face intense unbelief fueled by false narratives. False narratives perpetuate racism, prejudice, and bias." I don't think I've ever heard it put into the unbelief idea.
Yeah. That's the core issue, if you ask me. I think,
explain that so that
unbelief on many, many levels. Number one, there's a sense of unbelief that for a person who's been told that they are, if you will, superior, there's an unbelief around anyone else being equal. So there's a lack of a sense of equality that can't be accurate. There's no way that you're the same as me, right? And so there's that inferiority gets challenged, or that the sense that I am better gets challenged. And then I think there's unbelief simply in the sense that there's no way you're capable of achieving or accomplishing the same thing. You don't come from where I come from. You haven't experienced what I've experienced. You haven't been given what I've been given. So how can you possibly? So there's just a deep underlying unbelief, disbelief in people of color, and it's taught and it's ingrained from it's really foolishness is all that it is, because at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all created by God with the same capacity and so forth to achieve, but sometimes there are just human structures that prevent those things from happening. And I think that it's a strong sense of, and if you take it even deeper, you could say people believe that indeed God created, people of color, but he must have created them slightly different, right? And they're not quite created the same. They're not endowed and blessed in the same way that non people of color are, So there's just this really evil stream of unbelief that I think undergirds a lot of bias and prejudice.
But we don't know what color Adam and Eve were.
No.
Right?
Right.
I mean, and we don't know. So, we don't know who was first or who was
exactly
when. And we don't really know any part about that.
Yeah, that's a structure created by human beings, right? We've decided that lighter skin, fair skin is more favorable than dark, black skin. It's like they do studies all the time about, if you put a black baby doll in front of a kid, any kid, black or white, or a white baby doll, they're going to choose the white baby doll every time. Because
I don't get it.
Yeah, I know.
But do you think one of the questions that popped into my head when you first said this was kind of nonsense in a way, or just that you haven't experienced what I've experienced, and I haven't experienced what we all have different life experiences,
right.
But that's true of everybody.
That's true of everybody.
I mean, that's true of me and someone from China. That's true of me and someone from any different part of the pot that boils, particularly here in Orlando. We've got a pretty good melting pot of everybody. I mean, we've got a huge Russian contingency at our church, and Brazilian, Caribbean, and I look at this and what you said, and I think, are the ideas, or is that just a cop-out? Well, you know what? I don't really want to deal with you, so you don't really know me. You don't know what I'm about. You don't know where I've been. You don't know the struggles I've been, and you can't understand because I've been told that I can't understand, and there's no way to explain that. And I don't know if that's true or if it's not true. It very may well be, because the person that said it to me, I believe, was 100% earnest and believed it and wasn't being rude about it.
Yeah.
They weren't being confrontational. We were just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And so I often wonder if that's just okay, we just can't do this then because I can't understand and you can't understand. But are the things, in your opinion, or in your life experience, are the things that we think are way out here, are they that far, or are they really closer and we just don't see it, where we could make that, where maybe it's not as big a jump to find common ground as we think. So we miss the opportunity because we go, forget it. It's just too far.
Yeah.
They're never going to listen, or they're never going to understand. They don't want to understand. Or is it closer? And I don't know the answer. I'm just asking.
Yeah, it could definitely be closer in some cases and perhaps further apart in some cases. Like you said, everybody comes from a different position. I think, again, I kind of go back to this idea of believing. Do you believe is a better approach to it rather than fully understanding? Because like you said, I don't think we'll ever fully understand, because you can't understand growing up in the 70s in Little Rock, Arkansas, just down the road from Little Rock Central High School. That was me. I grew up in Arkansas. You grew up in Wisconsin. But when I tell you the stories and when I share with you when we integrated a suburb in Southwest Little Rock, we were the only black family there, that on the 4th of July, people shot bottle rockets and firecrackers and threw rocks, and there was likely not a day that went by that somebody didn't yell the N-word out the window of their car as they drove by because they knew we lived there.
Oh.
That's you can't experience that, you can't relate to it, but can you believe that is true?
Oh yeah.
And can you believe that I am telling the truth? And we have to base that on a relationship, and we have the type of relationship where you say, oh yeah, he's got credibility. So I think that's the bigger issue. And I think what we struggle with, and the reason there's a lot of tension oftentimes, is that people don't always believe Black people. They believe some of the narratives out there that just are wacky, stupid stuff. For example, we're in a post-racial culture, or ever since we've had an African-American president we don't have a racism
It doesn't
problem.
feel like it, though.
No, it doesn't feel like it. And here's the foolish thing about it is, all right, so let's take some other sin, for example. Lying. Do we still have a problem with lying in this country? How about
I don't think so.
Adultery?
No.
Oh, man. How about stealing? Yeah, I'd say so. So you're telling me that we've evolved to the point in our country that we have overcome racism, man. We got all these other issues, but racism, we conquered that, man. We all love each other regardless of race or color or story. I don't believe it.
And it almost feels like in racism, even not just black and white, which is the
right,
that's the prevalent that we hear, and we everything else gets compared to that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there's racism among all kinds of in China
right.
and the Muslims and in China and all these different things, and you just go, it's so prevalent everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And we expect better of ourselves in the U.S. At least we used to. I mean, sometimes I wonder, and as Christians, though, we definitely expect better of ourselves.
Right.
And, I can...
Absolutely. Amen to that. As Christians, absolutely, yeah.
Growing up in Wisconsin, there just weren't people of any color. It really was like Northeast Wisconsin. I was born and raised in Titletown, Wisconsin, Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
29 years lived there. And towards the end, there was a Hmong community, which I believe is somewhere near like Vietnam.
Right. Yep.
And they came into...
That was the only color that arrived in Green Bay, right?
Really? I mean, there wasn't... And of course, and it sounds really horrible, but when I was a kid, everyone knows the Green Bay Packers. Most of the players were white up until right before when I was a kid. And then, but it didn't strike me as anything. When you're a kid, it doesn't strike you at all.
Right.
Until later on, when I got to the academy, and there was a group of friends that all came from Milwaukee, and most of them were in my class.
Yeah.
And we got to be friends.
Yeah.
But they were the first people that I'd ever met face to face. I mean, not like you go to Chicago, you walk around, you see people, but like someone you actually become friends with. Yeah. And then for me, I was like, kind of what's the hubbub about, right? I mean, he's like me.
Exactly.
Where does it start for people that are just like have such different ideas and racist ideas, where does that begin? I mean, it's taught, but... or it's learned. It's learned.
Yeah.
And are we – have we moved away – have we gotten better in that at any part?
I think there perhaps is some evolution that's happened. Something has gotten better, and it's interesting. I love your story, and I think the interesting thing is your friends would have likely potentially recognize things that were – what we might call, racist, because there are structures that are in place that cater to the dominant or most, the dominant culture there. And so that doesn't mean that they were intended necessarily, although some may have been intentional. Yeah. It's just the structures that were there. And so I think where we sort of begin to turn the corners when we sort of naturally turn against that, or there's something we discern, and I think it's a God thing. God just sort of, makes us aware that this isn't quite right, because this isn't treating everyone equally or fairly. And now, for me, for those of us who experience that, we probably pick up on that right away.
Sure.
But I think for others outside of people of color, blacks, then there's just sort of this awareness that happens at some point, and you either benefit from it and go along with it and don't say anything, or you begin to live against it or try to operate in such a way that you align yourself with those who are being marginalized. And I think that's the real issue, even if you don't fully grasp it. But when you have a sense of, I'm probably being treated a little bit better here because of, and the popular term, which is super, super not inflammatory, but super, super controversial, is white privilege. Is there such a thing? And I happen to believe that there is, but I know people are going to argue against that. I just think it's there has been an advantage if indeed your skin is white. You probably don't have as many hurdles to overcome.
Right.
It's
No, and
a simple observation that I've made over my life. And I could give a personal story. Let me give this real quick because this is pertinent to. So in pastoral ministry, I did all the things I was supposed to do. I felt called as a teenager, like a 13-year-old, that I wanted to be a Seventh-day Adventist pastor.
Okay.
I wasn't born into the Adventist church. I became one as a teenager. So I went to academy at Ozark Academy, did everything I was supposed to do there. I was a leader. I was religious vice president, and then I went to Southwestern Adventist College at the time and enrolled in theology, did everything I was supposed to do there. I was I was like a student pastor. I did all that. I was a student missionary. Dude, I had the resume to walk right across that stage and become a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. The only problem was I was operating primarily in the Caucasian Adventist space.
Okay.
And so when it came time to interview, what happens is all the theology majors interview with all the conference presidents from around the union. At that time, that would have been the Southwestern Union. And so that includes any of the regional conference presidents. They come to the same thing. It's a big interview process. So you put on a tie, put on a suit, and you walk in, and all these conference presidents are sitting there. You do your best interview because these are the men who can hire you, right? So I did the best interview. The thing is, I had history there. People knew me. I'd grown up. I'd been, like I said, I'd gone to Ozark Academy. So I had a good track record. I was a leader. They knew me very well, the white guys and the black guys. But no one offered me a job. I went through that whole process, and none of them. And I wasn't black enough for the black presidents, wasn't white enough for the white presidents. So there's a real weird tension going on right there, right?
What?
So I left there pretty defeated and pretty much said, well, forget this. I don't want to do this anymore.
What?
And so here's ultimately what happened is
that hurts my brain.
Yeah.
No. I mean, finish your story. Finish your story.
Ultimately what happened is later that summer, this was in the spring, then there's graduation in May, and then hopefully you have a call. Well, I graduated without a call, but I had a couple of classes. I had a class to finish. And I was doing that class during the summer, and there was an administrative change in the Texas conference in particular. They brought in a new president, and this president gave me a second look because the church that I've been student pastor in sort of said, hey, he got passed over, but we want him. We love him.
Can we keep him?
Yeah.
Nice.
And they went to bat for me and advocated. And this president said, well, yeah, what's the problem here?
Yeah, what's the problem?
Yeah. And so he had enough vision to say, yes, we can hire an African-American in a white conference, if you will. And that's how I got my start in pastoral ministry. So I ran up against that in 1994. This isn't 1954 or 64.
No.
This is 1994.
And that's the part I don't know. I get why there's racism. I get how people see things on both sides and all of that. And
yeah.
But at the same time, I don't understand. I guess, and maybe it's because I know you, okay? But I'm just thinking to myself, the first time that I met you was at God Encounters.
Yep.
And then the call went out for a new senior pastor and I nearly got thrown out of a certain church board because I was
not far from here?
Not far from here because I'm just like, look, if we're looking for a senior pastor, you know who I want? This is my guy. And someone else was like, look, Bernie, the two of us, we're going to beat Bernie into your brains until I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Knowing you like I did, and even just from a short little bit at God Encounters, I'm like, Bernie's authentic. Yeah. Bernie is fun. He's always smiling. And if there's one thing that we could use a little bit more of in Christianity and in Adventism specifically is someone that knows how to smile, someone that knows how to deliver uncomfortable things like this past week with knowing that there's going to be someone in the audience, either online or in-house, that's probably going to be more than uncomfortable, but maybe upset.
Yep.
And you know that that's going to happen just statistically. Although I have a hard time. I mean, WholeLife has been with so many communities, and there's some cool things that are coming up that I can't wait to tell our church, tell the podcasters about. But we're not going to leak that today. But just to think about how someone would be like, well,
I know.
You're not, I mean, and then to be like, well, you're not black. I mean, how do you do this? And then and now with mixed race being such a norm, and you think to yourself, if this is still, and this brings us to your aunt's story, who a lady that at least in the black and white photos looks very white. She
looks very white.
Right.
Yes, she does.
But she's,
even in real life, she looks really white.
But the kind of abuse that she went through as a person. So it's not just about skin color. Yeah. It's really about that unbelief or that false narrative that is like, well, look, your great uncle on this side was black, and so you must be whatever we think of black people or of this person. Yeah. That's who you are. Doesn't matter what you look like.
Doesn't matter what you look like. Exactly.
And so there is a ton of ways that we treat people horribly in our actions, in what we do, what we say, who we want to be friends with, who becomes part of our inner circle. Yep. And it's so many more reasons than just skin color, right? Yeah. Like, I mean,
it is.
And there's a ton of things that we ostracize people or put them in different boxes.
Absolutely.
And so why is race? Is it slavery? Was it that because of the people that were horrifically abroad and abused for so many years, and that the Civil War was fought because, and that in itself is a mess. Yeah. And then when people look at the whole history, what is it about just a skin color that can make somebody like, well, here you go, here's your stamp, wear it well, and then well, okay, now we're done with you.
Right. It is.
Is it just that easy that we do?
I think sadly, because we're sinful and broken people, and we lack the capacity without really the love of Jesus flowing through us to see beyond the exterior, right? And so it's like if we could learn to love like Jesus commands us to love, and this goes for all of us sitting in the church too, then we wouldn't stop at simply looking at someone's color. We could recognize the color and then recognize that there's a culture that comes with that color, or assume certain assumptions about there's a culture that comes with that color. We don't even know. These days, you got all shades of people that come from all kinds of different cultures. And so we just can't stop at the exterior and make simple assumptions. Like you say, we can't put the stamp on people. And so it challenges all of us to go deeper with people, whoever they are. But, I think to a certain extent, you can make some assumptions well, it's not good to make any assumptions probably. But I think you do have to acknowledge or recognize that there is a historical connection to black people in particular in this country. And it may go back to slavery. It may go back to Civil War times. It may go back, wherever that connection is, we have that history. And my grandfather and my great-grandfather on my mother's side, there's certainly a history of slavery on my mom's side for sure. Wow. And so, I live with that. But again, as someone mentioned in one of the questions, the people today weren't around back then. Maybe their ancestors were. They weren't, so there's that. But that's not a cop-out, because we still have the sin of racism, and we have structures that are in place from way back when that still treat people unequally. And so we still all have to deal with it. I think we just have to really, really, or we have to be willing to engage people beyond the assumptions that we often make about different cultures. And sadly, we've been skewed on black people through media, through all sorts of media that give this certain narrative about who we are and what we're capable of doing. And those are super, super harmful. So,
Well, I like it mentioning that question. That was Trafina, and Trafina always comes up with the best questions.
Great question, Trafina. If you're listening, thank you for that.
Her and Zoe, her daughter, they come in pretty much every week but they're prepared, they're listening, and they're going like, wait a minute, I've got questions, and I love it. But you made it clear there that you weren't saying that because someone might say something like white privilege or they weren't there at that time, so why is it my problem? My family came over on, whatever. It was it was after all that.
Yeah, sure.
And you're like, well, we're not blaming anyone. We're just saying that look, whether you were here or your ancestors were here, and even if your ancestors were here and they were against it, it doesn't absolve where we're at now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't want to say that it doesn't absolve. That's a bad word. It doesn't solve anything. Because maybe they were on the right side of things, and yay for them if they were.
Right.
But even if that was all true, we're still where we are today.
Where we are.
So, if you want to say white privilege, if that triggers you in some way, then don't think about it that way. Think about it a different way and just say, look, even if your ancestors did everything right and you've done everything the best you can, we all have room to improve. We're all broken people. I loved how you said that. Yeah. But how do we get the people that would say, well, this isn't my problem because I may not be doing anything on the positive or the negative. I'm somewhere in the center and I'm just standing by. Yeah. And so
I'm just neutral.
Why does it matter what they think? Even if the racists and the bigots, as like you said, we know who you are and what Jesus can do through us. What does it matter? If we believe that, then what does it matter what they think? Is it just because we can't really – you have to take a side here, don't you?
I feel like,
as a Christian, I want to say.
As a Christ follower, there's no neutrality here. I think that, we represent God and his kingdom and we represent his love. And so we can't ignore when, there's injustices or inequality with other children of God, if you will. So I think we do have to be intentional. How intense and how intentional that looks, I don't know. But it could be as simple as something that someone told me just literally this past week. They heard the same message, and they said they were in a hotel. They're spending the night in a hotel, and they got up the next morning. How you go down and get the free breakfast. Mm-hmm. So they were down getting the free breakfast, and usually there's a news channel that's on, right? And so there was someone else in there. It's like just these two people. And the one guy was a worker, and then there was my friend, and they were having a conversation on the news channel about the Washington Football Club having to change their name, and now they're announcing their new name, right?
Yeah,
the Washington Commanders or something like that. Yeah, and this guy, the worker, was just going off. That's so dumb, man. Why are they having to change their name? That's just people are just too sensitive, and it's the PC, blah blah blah. And my friend took that moment to sort of walk through the crowd with and he said, listen, if you understand the atrocities that were committed against those who are native to indigenous people, if you understand how offensive that language is and that terminology is, the name of the former name of the football club, then you might have a better appreciation for why that's so important that name was changed. Now, people will debate back and forth all that. My point in sharing that is that I think that's a good example of at least trying to acknowledge and lend some level of belief to the fact that there have been great atrocities done, and that we still live in an era where we're feeling the ripple effects, that there's still structures in place that are slowly getting torn down, that Black people in particular are still dealing with. So I know it's, again, I keep going back to this idea. At some level, there's a conversion that happens, and you begin to believe.
If it was easy, we'd have solved it already.
We'd have solved it already.
Right?
And it's really difficult to help people believe something. And you'll hear, again, I think I said it in the Q&A time, that it gets really twisted because it gets politicized. So if you do believe that there have been, if there are still issues with race in America, then you're on a certain side of the aisle. And if you don't believe, you're on the other side of the aisle. And I just think it's so foolish because it's almost like if you could just live the life of an African American for a certain amount of time and walk a mile in our shoes, then you might have a better appreciation and come to believe it. But even then, some people will refuse to
No,
believe.
and I think I'm with you when you said that. That was a big amen for me, because the older I get, the less I believe in politics in side taking.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, maybe a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of that.
Exactly.
And it's like we all throw up in our mouth and we pull the lever for the least atrocious candidate that they give us, and
So true.
And then in the other races, like local, I'm always like, look, you get 2 years and then I throw you out. You're the incumbent. You're out. I don't even care if you're doing a good job. You're out, because that way you're not going to get rich and powerful, and I'm keeping you from the fall.
Exactly.
Anyway,
that big public failing. Yeah.
But I hate it, because it's like if you have an idea, even if it's just one idea that you resonate with one party with, and it's like, well, then you're a racist, or you're not a racist, or you're woke and you're not woke, and it's just like the conversation can't even get started before it even begins, or there's no traction.
Exactly.
But the problem, I think, also, and the one thing that I wrote this down as you were preaching, because I didn't want to forget it, I don't ever hear in day-to-day conversation the N-word.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just like we all walk around and people just use the term, maybe in pop culture, maybe in some music or things, but you choose to listen to that. So to me, racism now is even maybe worse than before it's that it's covert.
Exactly.
Because it's not just words.
Right.
People aren't shooting bottle rockets into your front yard like they don't. Most people don't have the guts to do that like they would have if they're still that level of anxiety.
Shoot something else back.
Right. Exactly. It's more subtle in
it is.
For what you see, what ways is it subversive and maybe not as visible as traditional ways, previous generations? Because I think that's another confusing part to people who don't understand it.
Right.
And they go, well, look, they're not burning crosses anymore. They're not shooting bottle rockets into Bernie's front yard anymore. Right. But now it's hiring processes. And the banking system, the way it was set up, and in housing, the way that was so many people lost. Redlining. And so all those things, and we know about that if you've studied your history. Yeah. But I don't think people see that now. They don't
even see it. Yeah.
And especially here in Orlando, because if you go to WholeLife Church, you see a lot of really successful
people
of any
all
color.
colors. Yeah, exactly.
And so you go, well, that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Right.
What do you see that maybe the rest of us don't, that you can let us in on, that might be another way that we go, oh, that's not cool.
Right.
Or this is something that maybe we have an in that we can just like you said, walking. I'm assuming this is part of that walking through the crowd.
Yeah.
And I just feel like those are things that maybe a lot of us don't pick up on.
Right. No, that's a great question. And outside of the hiring practices things and the housing things, obviously, I think there's still biases when it comes to African Americans attempting to rent a property or even purchase a home. I think there's been multiple, people telling their stories of if they called and they sounded a certain way, or if they had their white friend call and sound a certain way, that interest rate changed real quick, or the availability of a property changed real quick. Yeah. So those things probably still exist. There are probably a lot of things in healthcare that aren't seen too. And I wonder about, people low, socioeconomic status and a person of color and how they're treated in a hospital setting, the access to care,
there's a ton of research.
Yeah.
I mean, we do a lot of work with Advent Health and that's on their radar. Dr. Alric Simmons is leading the charge.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's a definite. I mean, and that may not be something everybody knows about, but your level of care in prenatal and postnatal care for a Black woman.
Yes.
That if that doesn't tear your heart out and just bring you to what in the almighty is going on? Help us, Lord. I mean, because it's 2022.
It's 2000,
and yet they can break everything down by zip codes and go. The quality and the access to care.
Quality and access to care. The believability around the pain. When Black women experience pain, the physician is less likely to believe their actual, that they're talking about their actual pain level. But again, that's just one area where there is that discrepancy, I believe. And I think hiring practice again. And right now we're walking through this with the NFL. How many African American coaches do we have? And it's always this thing that you want to hire the best qualified person, but are you taking a look at all of the best qualified people? Are you not, making sure that that pool, if you will, is very big and very colorful, for lack of a better way to put it? And I think the NFL could be guilty of that. There are probably other environments that are, in the corporate world that are guilty of not looking at, because either two things are happening. Either you're just going with the people that you know, and you just don't know any people of color, right? So you're not expanding beyond your base of people, your sphere of influence. Or it's something more sinister than that, right? You just don't want anybody in there. Or you believe that there's an African American or a person of color that is incapable. It goes to identity and ability, right? Yeah. Does that person really have the ability? Because all the stereotypes tell you that black people aren't as smart as white people, that, all these things that are ingrained in us. We didn't invite them in. This was environment building the stuff into us. And at some level, subconsciously, there's still, perhaps among NFL owners, that belief. If I get this coach, he's not going to be quite as sharp. This African-American coach isn't going to be quite as sharp as the white coach. Now,
but Flores,
they would deny that.
But Flores throws that on its head when the owner is sending him text messages and offering him $100,000 to throw games to get draft picks.
Exactly.
And he did it with arguably a not very good quarterback.
Right.
But you can't. But then it's like, well, it's a mess.
It's a mess. Yeah. So all that to say is, I think to be fair, and if you look at your leadership and it's clear that it's all middle-aged white males. Then again, sure, they may be the most qualified, but is there space for more other qualified people, just as qualified people, just as talented people that are also people of color in a corporate world or in another setting? And it just feels like it should be, right? We shouldn't have these exclusive sort of all one culture or one color sort of leadership makeup. So
absolutely. I think you look at when you meet someone and you wonder what are these parameters that, and how does the average person speak up?
Right.
And you want to walk through the crowd and you want to be like, man, like I was like, dude, Bernie's a guy that should be senior pastor at the church.
Yeah, you walk through the crowd.
And I want to do that. And I didn't think of it as walking through the crowd. It was just like, I know Bernie. And I like him, I can see that this guy would be amazing as a senior pastor.
Right.
And so, but
you were taking a chance, right? You were going on a hunch and a gut feeling, and the people around you, they were making a bigger decision. To them, they were making a big decision, and they're looking at all the other things, and they're saying, we're not sure that this one will work. And it probably went to, what will the outside world think? And then, is this person really capable of pulling this off? And in their minds, they decided, well, we're not really willing to take that chance. We're not really willing to pass the eyeball test on this one. And that is the huge barrier, Randy, I would say, is that people who really are committed to this journey of of equality and diversity and so forth, they have to be willing to say it may not, or the thing that's going to be done may not even get done in the way that we've been taught that it should be done.
Right, yeah.
Right? The I don't know if this is an appropriate, you can edit it out maybe, but the stereotypical way that, that people look at a quarterback for an NFL team is the white quarterback. He drops back and he throws a great pass, right? The black quarterback has an option, though. He's going to run it potentially. He might be able to drop back, but he could also take off and run the ball and gain some yards that way. And I say that simply to say that if you hire an African American, it may not get done the white way.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
It may get done a different way, and that's okay. That it doesn't look like, and it may be better, or it may challenge you a bit, right? I'm just saying that we've got to be willing to take that journey, that it's not always going to be done the white way, because the white way isn't always the right way, right?
But let's keep with that analogy, because sports is easy. And I would suggest then Doug Williams.
Doug Williams,
an elite passer in his time. And he was cerebral. Like you hear the
exactly
all the terms that you would typically hear of a white quarterback, they gave to Doug Williams. In his Super Bowl, that guy was on fire.
He was on fire.
I hated him only because I was a John Elway fan and a Bronco fan at that time, as well as a Packer fan. But I really loved John Elway, and I'm like, are they going to lose again to Washington? I hate Washington. Hate the NFC East. Anyway, but to the point, so what if it gets done this way or that way?
Exactly.
As long as, and I would say in Christian circles,
right.
as long as it's done with the love of Jesus pushing the cart forward, then we may all have to get used to, because I'll tell you, the people that often get hired in light of what could have been, everyone had to make an adjustment for them too.
Yes.
Because, no matter who you hire, it's not the person before. Right. I think it's just that we don't trust God to do what he's going to do.
Amen.
Because we're back to the unbelief. We don't believe God's going to do what he said he can do, and that he's capable of making or allowing that person's gifts to shine through for what he needs.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the problem.
A lot of it comes back to trusting God.
Oh man, I did love though, and we're about out of time. Well, but we
haven't talked about Alessandra yet,
and that's what we're coming there now. But here's the thing: Bernie did such a good job during the message. I'm like, if we're going to talk about something, the thing I want you to go, and if you swipe up in today's show notes, you will find links to go right to watch the sermon. You can listen to it on Speaking of Grace, which is also in the show notes. There's also a link in the show notes today to his aunt's book.
Yeah.
This is your grand aunt, easy for me to say, and Sandra Johnson. And the name of her book was
White Skin, Black Soul.
Black Soul. And I'm getting it because I got to read this, because she was part of the Little Rock 5, which came after the Little Rock 9, which was the first integration in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Little Rock Central High School,
And it was an amazing story. And I liked her right away. I mean, Bernie, the best part is the whole time that Bernie is telling the story, he's like this proud, family member, just like, that's my Aunt Sandra. Bernie's got an infectious smile with the big teeth and the dimples anyway. So you just watch the pride in.
Oh my gosh.
And that's part of what made the most impact to me. And it was, I get what's happening here. This is huge.
Right.
Huge. No downplaying that.
No.
But what it really brought out to me was how people, even in growing up as an African American in a deeply segregated area, in a hotbed of politicization, of race, of all these things. And what Bernie, and again, I don't want to diminish anything in Bernie's journey that I don't know about or I don't understand, but to watch somebody talk about a family member who other people threw things at, called, I'm sure more even horrific things than the N-word. Like you didn't spell those out for us. And then to see the proud, the proud family member, the proud just nephew here, just going like, this is my aunt, this is my heritage, and owning all of it and saying, there was bad, there was good, and there was activism, there was movement and so, a lot of times I think we look at this and you're like, holy cow, there's 101,001 1,000,001 things we can worry about, and treating each other with the love of God and treating each other as equal should be right there in the like our top things to do.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
But it feels like when we don't see people like Bernie telling stories like you're telling, and it's hard, I get it, when you don't have friends in other places that have had those, and not everyone's willing to share. Right. Some people are really scarred to the point where they're like, I've heard, you don't deserve that story. We're not close enough yet, and you don't get that story. Only when you get to a certain level, and we're still in a point where we don't have a lot of those relationships. We don't have enough of them. Let's just say that. There's probably a lot of them, but there's not enough of them.
Yep.
And to see, though, someone tell the story of being a champion for the right cause, and she was on the front line. You talked to her last week on the phone, and you said it could have been a 3-hour phone conversation, and the family and the pride that goes into it shows that, look, that dispelled all of the unbelief. Even if I didn't know you, I'm watching this and I'm going, there's diversity, there's equity, and there's inclusion in my family, and we're all in this, and we're just asking you, like you said at the end of your message, we're just asking you to walk with us through this. So I'm going to let Bernie tell Auntie's story in there, because we still have questions to ask, and we're going to be over an hour before we're out of here. And so I was like, what part can you get in the message that I can't do justice with in asking questions? So I'm going to do that. But just know that story is not to be missed. So that just watching Bernie tell the story is worth the price of admission, and it's free, by the way. You can catch
totally
it
free.
You can catch it audio and or in video.
Well, let me jump in here, because I think Martin Luther King Jr. has this great thing that he said, a great quote, as he has a gazillion great quotes. But he talked about, and I tried to remember this in the sermon. I think first service I didn't remember, and then second service I did, or something like. Anyway, but he calls it the thingification of a human being, and that's when he's referring to how people look at African Americans. Obviously through his era, and still to this day at some levels, that when you see somebody as just a thing, you can do whatever you want to with them, right? You dehumanize them. And what I wanted to do in a big way is just tell the story about, my Aunt Sandra, so that there's more of a humanization of her, both from the era that she grew up in and she lived through, and even right now. And that's why I said, hey, I talked to her just this week. She's still around. She has lived beyond this story. There are more stories that are being told about her. And she has shattered those false narratives. And I said, I can't wait to introduce you to her, right? Because I just wanted you to understand that she's real, she's human, she's a wonderful woman, even not because of what she's been through, but partly because of what she's been through, but also because of who she is today and who she became despite what she, had to overcome. Yeah. So anyway, just the humanization of Black people is maybe that's even like a primary goal for African American History Month, right? To look back and say, oh, those were real people that were mistreated. They weren't just things. Those were human beings that, people treat their dogs better than that. And so it's
difficult when you start talking about numbers. And I think with Whoopi Goldberg being in the news this week with the Holocaust and people, you start talking about 7 million people, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, that's just a number.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
right.
7 million. I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet. 7 million. I mean, and it just becomes cliched to say that, because the further we get away from that history, the less it means. Because
we say American slavery.
You don't have skin in the game.
Right.
And here, that's the other part I thought was unique, though, was because even though it wasn't you, it was her, that there's a connection to there's a connection to this story that is you Google it, you can this is history. This is real history.
Exactly.
And to have
she lived there. She was in it. She was right in the midst of it, right?
Yeah.
And so
but that's unique. I think that's the part, Lynn. I think you're right. The humanization part is very hard, very easy to overlook, because we don't realize in some cases that we're doing it, or we do realize and go, well, but that was a long time ago. I mean, what does that mean to me today? Right. But to know that she is still here, she's still living life, and she's had many accolades past that professionally.
Flight attendant, and just this very real sense of her own identity, who she is and what she's capable of doing. And that was to affirm the Black family. In the book, she talks about how strong her family was, her mother and father, how they supported her. And one of the stereotypes out there is just that the African American family just is, nothing. It's in shambles. And we have our issues. There's no question about that. Well, and all families do. But
I was just going to say, have you seen the statistics for everybody in the nuclear family? It's not great.
But again, that stereotype that is out there. But she, in an era when it was very difficult difficult, her family was a very real place of strength and grounding for her. And I think that that's important to bring out too, that there were strong Black families that lived through the most tumultuous time, in history for African Americans, really. And
and there still are. There still are a lot of strong. And I did want to read a quote that you gave from Aunt Sandra, because I thought it was something I want to put on my daughter's wall as a strong woman, because she said, but more importantly, I was a Black person who was exhibiting pride, strength, who was not seeking anyone's approval or friendship. Although I didn't reject friendship, making undesirable friends or getting their endorsement was not my mission or goal.
Yes.
Adults, pay attention, because I think the other part about this that really struck me was it's so much easier to let, and it doesn't have to be just racism. This can be gossip. This can be a ton of things. And I'm not comparing those two, mind you, but I'm just saying there's a lot of applications here where if we're really exhibiting pride in ourselves, and strength, of whoever we are, whether we're Black, white, or any nationality, any person, and we're not seeking their approval or friendship, we should be seeking Jesus' approval and friendship to knock off these unbeliefs and these false narratives. Then the right people God will bring to us, and this solves so many problems.
A lot of issues.
If we take what she realized was, look, I'm not going to make you happy, you happy, you happy.
Exactly.
So first off, I got to know I am good with me.
Identity.
And who you are. And if you know that you're God's child, hallelujah, things are going to go way better. And your impact and your walking alongside through the crowd is going to happen.
Exactly.
I love that quote.
Same here.
And so that really stuck out. And I'm like, so I am definitely ordering the book because you have me intrigued of the story alone. I love history stories. All right, so we did have 2 questions from Q&A that we didn't get to. And the first one is, and there was 2 parts, but Tammy answered it, but I want to read. The first part is, what does walking through the crowd look like for a church body? And I would even add, what does that look like for whole life if we start getting this right, like all the time or pretty close to all the time, like as best as we can? And their follow-up comment was, is Atara here just because it's Black History Month, or is this something that will happen more often?
Right.
And so Tammy answered that just to make sure the person understood that Atara is one of our leaders. She's a big
been
leader,
up front a lot,
and she's one of our upfront leaders, and she does an amazing job as she did this week.
Exactly.
So it wasn't just.
Because let's put the person of color in there this week because it's convenient and
it's easy to do it, and even for the right reasons, because it should be a Black person, right? And that I think that's totally appropriate. But what does walking through the crowd look like at WholeLife Church? What do we look like, or what do we do? Is there things that we'll see as we get better on this journey?
Yeah, I think this past weekend was a good model, and I'm sure we'll continue, but we saw a white woman talk about her journey of becoming a believer, if you will. She wasn't sure that African American History Month, speaking of Tammy, should matter to her, and it does it involve her, does it, and she has come through this journey. So she's modeling as a church leader, as a pastor at the church, as a person of influence in the church, as a white woman. She's saying, I had to kind of go on this journey of understanding and coming to know more about the contributions of African Americans. And I think that's a good model to have. We had a message that was challenging, hopefully, to us all as a church family to say, let's open our eyes a little bit wider. Let's get in and start to align ourselves in such a way that we begin to learn and that we begin to grow. And let's get uncomfortable so that we can grow in this area. So there was a prophetic call too, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's testimony, prophetic call, and then I think there was an intentionality to it too. I think it wasn't tokenism that Atara did the online.
No, absolutely.
It was intentionality. I think there's a significant difference. So the fact that we were intentional around making sure that a young African American woman was represented and up front, I just think that was a good model. There's certainly more that can be done, but the fact that WholeLife even has this conversation and allowed me to share in this way says that we're at least that we're open to it. And so
absolutely.
I think that alone just speaks well, and it's walking through the crowd. And now everybody in the church had to leave the church and go out and have a greater awareness, perhaps, of what's going on with people of color around them.
Yeah.
And maybe it will challenge them or encourage them to engage a conversation.
Absolutely.
Or to ask more questions in an appropriate way. So, yeah, and we'll do more of it, I'm sure. That's Ken's heart, and that's
Absolutely.
the heart of the leaders and our pastors. So that's a big part of why I'm at WholeLife Church, too. So.
No, absolutely. I would rather hear about racism, social injustice, any kind of thing that are in our blind spots,
right,
where I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But it might manifest itself in a way that you've never considered before.
Right.
And so the best of us may not have it all figured out. We probably don't.
No.
And so we all have blind spots. And so if I want an ouch, I want an ouch from Bernie.
Yeah.
I want an ouch from Atara.
Yes.
I want
from my family.
From my family.
Yeah.
And I've appreciated since Ken's day one that we are family.
Yes.
And so families have uncomfortable conversations.
Yep.
Families say stupid things sometimes.
Really dumb things.
And families rarely all agree on everything. And, so there are challenges, and we understand that. But we're also about living like Jesus and saying we're going to give you grace. I expect grace in return because we're living that life. And so I want to hear if there's something that's in my life that needs to change. I want to hear that from a friend.
Yes.
It's safe. And if it's safe, we all learn, we all grow.
Yep.
And if I have a problem, I can come to Bernie and say, I don't understand why you said that.
Right,
Because I think, am I wrong?
Right.
And you can say, bro, from my perspective, absolutely, you're wrong.
Exactly.
And then we can have that out, and we'll hug afterwards.
Exactly.
And we'll be good.
Right.
All right.
No, totally agree. Understand this, that if I made you mad and you got up and walked out, it's perfectly good. It's perfectly fine. Here's what I'll tell you. I ain't mad. I give you the benefit of the doubt because we're family.
Yeah.
When you're family, you do that.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
That person's just not having a great day. Or they clearly have a problem with me and we're going to have to talk later. And that's okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
but you totally get the benefit of the doubt.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's big. Okay. Last question from Anonymous. I used to not really think about people having different skin color. I knew that the color of their skin was different, but I didn't really think anything of it. I feel like I notice that more now. Is that wrong, or is it just part of awareness?
I think it is probably just growing in our own awareness. It's really a funny thing. I don't like people to walk on eggshells in any situation.
No,
I want people to just be who they are. Don't tiptoe around me. If you see my black skin, don't try to be something you aren't. Don't try to, just be you. And if you come across wrong to me, or if I come across wrong to you, let's engage there and come to some level of understanding. That's always my deal. I don't, I'm not looking to be offended. I'm not looking to be celebrated per se because of my blackness. I think you have to recognize that there's of the blackness, right? You can't just ignore that. But I don't need you to do anything special for me, right? No. So, I think it's just a greater awareness, and that's fine. And let's just be on the journey together, because
I think those are the opportunities where you just have to go, look, is it okay if I ask a question?
Exactly.
And you say yes or no.
Yep.
Not today. I will, and if it's a bad day,
right. If it's
let's do this a different time. I'm totally open to it.
Right.
I can't right now.
Right.
Because that's the only caveat
And it has to be a sincere question from the heart.
Yeah.
It has to be in pursuit of, I'll use this word, it's a very deep word, an important word, intimacy. You got to be after something deeper than just trying to have an answer to a popular culture question. It's got to be an interest in who I am.
Yeah, why do you want to know?
Yeah, why do you want to know? What's your point in asking? What are you trying to get at? And now you could probably ask me, and I wouldn't be, I don't care. But a lot of people would be highly offended, right?
Yeah.
But you got to come with a sincere heart that says that you're on the journey. You are in the crowd or you're walking with us through the crowd, and this is just part of your journey. Don't come with any foolishness about, just to be foolish.
So we're gonna throw everything else out the window. We're not gonna go. Though we answered the questions, thank you for those. Because next week it is Arise to Spiritual Justice with Ken Wetmore. All right, guys. Now, the other part is next week is episode 298, and then 299, and then 300. We're still looking for more ideas of what we should do and where we should go and how we should tape episode 300, because it's kind of a milestone. 300 episodes, that's a lot. And so again, if we're going to just keep throwing it out there, Ken wants to do this from the Disney Princess Castle. So if you have a hookup, make sure you send in the hookup as soon as we can, so we can get that scheduled. Bernie, you don't have any connections at Disney, do you?
I actually do.
Well, you might want to talk to Ken. He's really you should have seen his eyes light up sitting right in your chair there when he said, "What about the Disney? What if we could tape the podcast from the Disney Princess Castle?" I'm like, "Oh, I was thinking like beach or someone's pool in their backyard. Your aspirations are way up here." So what? We're in here like over an hour, but I hope that today's conversation, I feel like I was blessed by today's conversation. I always feel blessed when I get a chance to hang out with Bernie, because he's my friend, and I love it when he preaches, and it's always a different perspective, and I love that. And also, and I forgot to put this in my show notes, so forgive me, but swipe up in today's show notes. There will also be a link. This episode will be included in that link. But all of our previous episodes on racism, we did multi-parts 2 series. We did a George episode on George Floyd.
Wow!
And so all of those episodes will be in one collection for you to click on. Not as anything other than just, I want you to know that this is something that WholeLife Church has definitely. We take seriously. We want to have those conversations. We want to be better together. And the only way we do that, of course, is by having these conversations as a family. There's a lot of good information, and there's a lot of good discussion and tips and all kinds of things that went into those. And so those will also be in today's show notes, because I want to be able for you also to be able to share those. If there's people that you know that struggle with this and would like to hear someone else's perspective, this might be the easiest way to walk through the crowd with us together as a family, is to share this with maybe someone you're not comfortable maybe talking to about it just yet, but like, hey, this is something I found interesting and something I want to get better at, learn more about, be better at, and share it that way. So it might be one way you can do that. So as always, thank you, Bernie. Appreciate you coming
Randy.
In. And
good stuff, man. Great coffee too.
Great. Yeah, we do it all here at the podcast. And so that is going to do it for this week. Again, if you got a hookup, send us, or a good idea for 300, let us know. And then next week, Jeff and Ken will be back. It's Ken we'll be back to the Arise series with Spiritual Justice. So that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for listening as always and sharing, and have a great week.